Good Friday morning. It's the Daily Beat on KBEY 103.9. I'm Ben Shields with DailyTrib.com news editor Dakota Morrissiey. Dakota, how you doing?
Dude, I'm doing great.
All right, let's talk elections because first off, y'all were busy for months following the run-up to the elections, the primary elections here in the state of Texas, and we had some big races in Burnet and Llano counties, and so they have come and gone. And y'all stayed up late chasing the results. And tell us about the results. First off, let's stay in Burnet County.
Yes, so in Burnet County, big decisions in the Republican primary. The voters got out and they chose to keep Brian Wilson as Burnet County judge. He went up against Burnet County Sheriff's Office Chief Deputy Alan Trevino, who had been campaigning for a long time for that role. So it was a pretty close race, but in the end, voters did choose to keep Brian. So he'll finish out this year, and then he'll continue for another 4 years now. And for the Precinct 2 commissioner race, you have the incumbent Damon Byerly. He won out against Leonard Ginter by a pretty hefty margin. And again, he'll serve another 4 years in office.
Going back to the Burnet County judge race, Brian Wilson, he was appointed judge about a year ago, right? Mm-hmm. So he was on the job for about a year. And
yes.
Voters liked enough what he did that they decided to keep him around.
That's right. There's been a little bit of confusion is that Brian was appointed by the other members of the court, like you said, exactly a year ago, pretty much back in last March. And that was after the previous county judge had resigned. So he was the incumbent, but not by election. But now the people have actually spoken, and they chose him to keep that office.
All right, you're all over that Burnet County the Burnet County races. So go to DailyTrib.com to read about the finale of those. All right, let's go to Llano County. Two big races there. So we got a new Llano County judge, and then the incumbent for the Llano County Commissioner's Precinct.
Yes. So just clear things up. We did get a brand new county judge because the current judge, Ron Cunningham, he chose to not run for re-election, and he's actually stepping down. And the winner of this race is going to take his seat immediately instead of waiting until 2027. So that winner was Rob Hardy. He won the Republican nomination, and he was going against Richard Koepp, and he does not have a Democratic challenger, so that means he's just going to automatically take office. And Rob is the current mayor of Sunrise Beach Village, and he's on the Llano Regional Hospital Authority Board. So he's a recurring character in Llano County for sure. And now he's going to be county judge.
And soon.
Yeah, next Monday.
All right, so he'll be really into the fire. Although being a mayor, he already does have a public experience.
Yes, Rob Hardy also, if you look him up on Daily Trib, is also featured in the Picayune because he and his wife had a terrible hydrilla problem, and I interviewed them for a story about hydrilla infestation on Lake LBJ.
All right, so Rob Hardy, the new Llano County judge. Now let's talk about the big commissioner's race that was happening in Llano County, contentious at times.
Yes, so this one's a little more complicated. You have incumbent Republican Precinct 4 commissioner, which is like kind of the city of Llano area in the west side of the county. He went up against Robert Little in the Republican primary race, and he won by a huge margin. It was 90%, voters for Jerry Don. He's been serving almost 20 years. He's in his 5th term in office right now. And what makes this race interesting is that Robert Little, who ran against him, is married to the Democratic nominee who's also running for that office, Leela Green Little. So what's happening is now Jerry Don beat Robert, and now he's going to face off against Leela in the November general election later this year.
All right, so that'll be in November.
Yes, in November, and this is a big deal. We very rarely have Democratic, candidates going up against Republican candidates in the general election. So we're going to keep following this. And for anybody who's familiar with these names, it's because Leela Green Little was a plaintiff in the Llano County Library System lawsuit, and Jerry Don was a defendant in that lawsuit. So there's a lot of history on this. And the best way to learn about this is to go to DailyTrib. We have about 60 stories covering this lawsuit.
All right, so DailyTrib.com, you can find all about the election results, and Dakota goes in depth on both the Llano County and the Burnet County results. So great job by your team, Dakota. You really hit it out of the park.
I appreciate it, man. I think these races are really important, and something I didn't say is that if you don't know what these people do, these county judges and these commissioners, they play a huge role in local government. They get big salaries, $100,000 or more in some cases. They're responsible for setting the tax rate, the budget, taking care of county roads. They fund the sheriff's office. So these aren't small positions. They have a big role. And when you vote for these people, you're picking somebody for 4 years to have a say in, your daily life.
All right, so read all about it at dailytrib.com, dailytrib.com/subscribe. All right, so let's talk about Burnet. We've seen housing, a lot of subdivisions going south of Marble Falls, and then you also see, if you go towards Liberty Hill, a lot of subdivisions. Well, Burnet's trying to cut that off at the pass.
Yeah, so the city of Burnet is adjusting some of their zoning rules because they're kind of taking a page out of other, like you just mentioned, these other big cities that are springing up in the area, where they want to have some say in what gets built and how it gets built and the regulations surrounding it, specifically around like multifamily living units, apartment complexes, and things like that. So we saw some pretty major changes to the city's policies on. They just want to make sure that somebody doesn't spring up a cookie cutter apartment complex and cram as many rooms as possible onto an acre. So if you go to DailyTrib, our reporter Caden Sen is our new Burnet area reporter, and he does a great breakdown of some of those new rules. And you can see that the elected officials of Burnet are really taking to heart, some of these concerns about growth in the area and trying to manage it as smartly as possible.
All right, dailytrib.com to read all about that Caden Sen story. All right, Dakota, anything else?
Yeah, some sad news, I think. We've got Fuzzy's Corner, legendary bar in Llano County, just got closed down last week.
Wow.
It's gone.
Been around for years.
I mean, I did a little research, and it first opened back in the 50s.
Wow.
And it's been at that spot since the early 70s. So we're talking about over 50 years right there.
Do we know what happened, or is there anything else that's going to go there?
Yeah, unfortunately, the guy running it, he's 81. His family said, hey, it's time to throw in the towel and take care of yourself. And he chose to not renew his lease at that spot. The owner of that property sold to the highest bidder, and from what we understand, they're not going to reopen the bar, and we aren't really sure of the future of that specific plot of land.
All right, then another closing. This was in Marble Falls, and Bear King hadn't been around quite as long, but was still a popular spot the past 6 or 7 years in Marble Falls.
Yeah, very popular. It was kind of shocking from what we could, the response from the community. Like you said, Bear King Brewing Company in Marble closed down unexpectedly. Tomorrow they're going to have sort of a farewell party. So if you're listening to this, maybe head out to Bear King on Saturday and get a last bite or brew.
All right, so as always, Dakota, y'all been busy.
It's
Keeping
crazy.
track of all the stuff going on.
Yeah.
All right, so read what the team's doing at DailyTrib. That's dailytrib.com. All right, Dakota, always fun. Let's do it again next week.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
It's the Daily Beat on KBEY 103.9.